I never believed in ghosts, not really. Like most people, I thought spooky stories were for kids around campfires, not something adults actually took seriously. But everything changed the year I moved to a small town called Ashpine, nestled deep in the hills of Tennessee, where fog clung to the roads like old secrets and shadows moved a little too deliberately. I moved there in the fall of 2021, right after I quit my job and ended a 5-year relationship. I just needed peace, solitude, a reset. When I found a listing for a 2-bedroom cottage off Willow Road for a laughably low rent, I didn't ask questions. I should have. The cottage was small and rustic, but charming in its own way. Old pinewood floors, brick fireplace, and a front porch that looked out over a field that disappeared into thick forest. The landlord, a wiry old man named Tom, told me the house had been empty for a while, but everything worked fine. I didn't press him on why it had been vacant so long. The first few days were quiet, peaceful even. I unpacked, walked into town, tried to adjust to the slow rhythm of country life. People were kind, but reserved. When I mentioned where I was staying, their expressions would shift, some subtle, some not. Willow Road, you say? That's a ways out. One woman at the general store said, eyebrows knitting together. Hope you sleep sound. I laughed nervously, brushing it off. I figured small-town folks just liked to gossip. But by the end of my first week there, I started noticing things, small things. At first, the wind always seemed to pick up around 2 a.m., not a breezalow, hollow howl, like the wind was alive, circling the house. Sometimes I'd hear creaking, like someone was walking across the floorboards. But when I'd check, the house would be empty. One night, I came downstairs to find every cupboard in the kitchen wide open. I thought maybe I'd left them that way, or a breeze had somehow pushed them, but they were all neatly opened. Too neat? I told myself I was just tired. City brain adjusting to rural silence. That's what I kept saying. But then there was the door. The second bedroom's door wouldn't stay closed. I'd shut it before bed, and every morning it'd be open. One night, I heard something from inside, not a voice, a sound, like whispering, like someone muttering a name just below the threshold of hearing. And once, just once, I swear, I saw something move past the crack in the door, a shadow shaped like a person. But there was no one there. I started to lose sleep. I'd wake up gasping from dreams I couldn't remember. Always the same time, 3:06 a.m., not 3 o'clock, not 3:10, always 3:06. That number started to haunt me more than the dreams did. A week later, I met Ben. He worked at the hardware store. Friendly guy, early 30s, thick southern accent, but sharp as a tack. We started talking one day while I was buying a flashlight and batteries by then. The power had flickered too many times at night for me to feel comfortable. Ben asked where I lived, and when I told him, he paused, real still. You near the old Willow Inn? He asked. Couple miles down the road. He shook his head. Shouldn't be anyone living out there. That caught my attention. He told me the story in pieces. 50 years ago, there'd been a roadside inn on Willow Road, a small place, 6 rooms, a dining hall run by a family. In 1971, every guest staying at the inn vanished overnight. No sign of struggle, no bodies, just gone. The innkeeper's family, too. Police investigated for weeks, found blood in one of the room's walls, covered in something that looked like symbols, but no leads. Eventually, the inn was condemned, torn down, but no one built on that land again. They said the land wasn't right. I asked Ben if he believed that. He didn't answer right away. I believe some places hold things, he finally said. And sometimes those things don't forget. That night, I tried not to think about it, but I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing something tapping on the window. When I finally got up the courage to check, I saw handprints on the inside. Small, pale handprints trailing down the glass. My skin went cold. The next morning, I found something under the floorboard in the second bedroom, a loose plank near the closet. Underneath was a small, faded notebook, leather cover, worn with age. It belonged to someone named Elise Maddox. Her entries were dated 1971. She wrote about staying at the Willow Inn, described hearing things at night, whispering, doors opening, figures watching from the woods. Her final entry chilled me to the core. They keep calling my name. Last night I saw them standing in the hallway. I don't think we're guests here. I think we're being kept. I showed Ben. He turned pale. Elise Maddox, he said. That name's on the missing persons list. One of the guests never found. I was ready to leave. I packed a bag, drove into town, told Tom I was breaking the lease. He just nodded, like he'd been expecting it. No argument, no refund either. Just this: you're lucky you're living. Most don't get the chance. I planned to stay one more night, just to pack the rest and go. But that night was different. It started with the lights. Every bulb in the house blew out at once, a crackling pop that echoed through the rooms. Then the radio turned on in the kitchen, playing an old song, something scratchy and warped, like a recording from the 40s. Then the whispers started. Not soft anymore, loud, overlapping, desperate. They were in the walls, in the hall, in my ears. I ran outside, only to find the forest was wrong. The trees didn't look real anymore. The sky had turned a deep, unnatural gray. The cottage behind me flickered, like an image on an old TV screen. For a moment, I thought I saw the willow standing where the cottage should be, tall, decrepit, with lights in every window, and in those windows, faces, watching, waiting. Ben came, said he'd had a bad feeling, and drove over. He saw it too. We both stood frozen as the image of the inn shimmered in and out of sight. Then it let out this sound, a low, moaning groan, like metal being torn. And the air grew thick with a smell of rot and old perfume. We ran. The next morning, everything looked normal again. But we didn't go back. We never even looked over our shoulders. I moved 3 states away, burned the notebook, changed my number. But sometimes, late at night, I still wake at 3:06 a.m., and I still hear it, a whisper, carried by the wind. Sarah, ****. I first heard about the house on Black Hollow Lane from my cousin Danny. We weren't close, not really, but out of nowhere, he called me late one night. His voice was shaky. He said he needed help, said he couldn't sleep, said the walls were whispering to him. I thought he was having a breakdown. Danny had always been the artistic, sensitive type, too many emotions, too little armor, but this time felt different. He said he bought a house in a small town called Oakhaven, nestled somewhere deep in northern Pennsylvania. The place was dirt cheap, but came with history, bad history. At the time, I had just lost my job and was on the verge of eviction. I figured, Why not? I could use a change, maybe even help him get back on track. So I packed my things and drove 12 hours straight to get there. The farther I went, the more isolated the world became. Cell signal faded, roads narrowed, and every house I passed looked like it hadn't seen a coat of paint in 20 years. Finally, I reached the end of a gravel road, and there it was, the house on Black Hollow Lane. It didn't look cursed, just old, 2 stories tall, Victorian architecture, weathered gray siding, boarded up attic windows, a wrought iron fence wrapped around the property, rusted and jagged. Danny was waiting for me on the porch, looking like he hadn't slept in days. "You came," he said, voice hollow. "Yeah," I replied. "You okay?" He didn't answer, just nodded and motioned for me to come inside. The house was cold, not from the temperature, though it was chilly, but from something else, a kind of deep, hollow cold that felt buried in the walls. The furniture was mismatched, the wallpaper peeling, but it wasn't the decay that unnerved me. It was the feeling that the house was watching. Dottie showed me to the guest room upstairs, said I could stay as long as I wanted. Then he disappeared into his own room, shutting the door quietly behind him. That first night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing sounds, nothing obvious, just slight creaks, faint tapping, like something moving within the walls. And there was this strange smell like burnt wood and old perfume. I told myself it was just the house settling, my nerves playing tricks on me. But then things started happening. Lights would flicker for no reason. Doors would open by themselves. I'd hear soft crying at night, but when I'd go check on Danny, he'd be asleep, or pretending to be. One morning, I found claw marks on the inside of my closet door. Not scratches, claw marks, deep and deliberate. I tried to laugh it off, but Danny didn't even flinch when I told him. "They're waking up again," he said quietly. "What do you mean?" I asked. He just stared at the wall. "You'll see." The next night, I found a journal under a loose floorboard in my room. The pages were yellowed, the handwriting frantic. It belonged to a woman named Margaret Wallace, dated 1926. She lived in this house with her husband and daughter. The entries started out normal, then spiraled into madness. They speak through the mirrors. One line read, "My little girl won't stop humming that song, the one they taught her. I can hear them in the cellar at night, whispering." Another entry, "He came again last night. The man with no face, just teeth and a black suit. He stands by the bed. He never blinks." And the final one, "They've taken Clara. I see her eyes in the dark. She's not mine anymore." I couldn't sleep after